14 years ago, a man in North Dakota vanished without a trace in the middle of a winter night, leaving behind a vehicle that was still warm to the touch and a garage light burning all night long, as if he had only stepped away for a moment. Police suspected a voluntary disappearance, but they found no clues whatsoever. No vehicle, no footprints, no note, and the investigation quickly stalled. Yet through all those years, one young cold case investigator with the Bismarck unit could never let go of that strange file, convinced that something unsaid still lay buried beneath the cold concrete floor of that garage. Then one day, while reviewing the old crime scene photos, she spotted a critical detail everyone else had missed. A small patch of concrete that was a slightly different color, tiny but enough to change the entire direction of the case. That discovery unlocked the most shocking secret in North Dakota criminal history. Before we dive deep into this chilling true story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and if you love real crime cases like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. North Dakota in 2011 was a place changing faster than ever before. New oil wells drilled deep beneath the permafrost had turned what used to be barren wilderness into a booming extraction hub. The town of Williston, once a quiet community of just a few thousand people, was now packed with migrant workers and oil trucks running day and night. But amid the noise of that brand new industrial zone, life in the southern outskirts of town still moved at a slow, isolated pace. Along snow-covered back roads, prefab houses sat far apart, with only the occasional light cutting through the blowing white. Mark Kane, 47, an electronics engineer who worked for an oil drilling equipment company, lived there with his wife Eleanor, a piano teacher who gave lessons from home. They had been married 15 years and kept to a quiet, regular routine, staying clear of the chaos in the center of town. Their small house sat at the end of a dirt road, backed by open frozen fields and a metal fence that rattled whenever the wind picked up. That winter came early and hard. Snow piled deep, power flickered, and the backup generator in the garage was something Mark always checked when the temperature dropped. That evening, as the sky turned the color of lead and the first real wind of the season swept through, Eleanor was cleaning the kitchen when she heard the back door slam. Mark threw on his heavy coat, pulled on gloves, and said he was just stepping out to the garage to check the generator before the wind got worse. The yellow glow from the garage bulb spilled out through the falling snow, showing the silhouette of a man bent over the metal workbench. An old radio played the music station he always kept on while he worked, scratchy speakers mixing with the howl of the wind. Inside the house, Eleanor dried her hands, poured some water, and could still hear the familiar sounds drifting in. Then, after a while, she realized the noise from the garage had stopped. All she could hear was wind screaming past the windows. She went to the back door, called her husband's name into the white nothingness, but got only snow swirling around her legs and wind slapping her face. The garage light was still on, the radio still playing, but Mark didn't answer. Eleanor threw on a coat, walked the icy path to the garage, and looked around in the weak light. There were no fresh footprints, no tire tracks leaving the property. The air felt thick and numbingly cold. She went back inside, stood by the phone for a long moment, then called the Williams County Sheriff's Office to report that her husband had vanished into the snowstorm. On the other end of the line, the night duty officer calmly took down every detail and entered the call into the emergency response system. Dispatch immediately flagged it as a missing person in dangerous weather conditions. The incident code was activated, and a field response team was sent out. Sheriff Wes Larrabee, who oversaw the South Williston area, got the alert while on the late shift. He pulled up the summary, read it fast, and headed out. Investigator Haley McCarran was assigned to run the scene. Patrol units rolled out of the station into skin-cutting cold, tires crunching over glare ice. When they reached the outskirts, headlights barely pierced the wall of snow, picking out scattered houses here and there. The Kane house sat alone at the end of the dirt road, only the faint yellow glow of the garage light visible in the distance. Larrabee pulled up to the gate. The team stepped out into wind that cut visibility down to a few yards. McCarran checked the yard. Smooth, even snow with no adult footprints. The garage door stood slightly ajar. A long beam of light stretching out, the radio still droning inside. They documented the scene exactly as found, back door of the house shut tight. No signs of forced entry anywhere, the whole area quiet, with zero evidence anyone had come or gone. Eleanor opened the front door when Larrabee knocked, her face pale from cold and panic. She was told to stay inside and not disturb anything. Outside, the team cordoned off the yard and garage with tape. McCarran filmed panoramic video, logging light sources, wind direction, door positions. An ambulance was called to stand by. Larrabee marked search grid points and drew a temporary 300-meter radius map centered on the house. Temperature kept dropping. Snow kept falling, erasing whatever faint marks might have been there. After initial procedures, Larrabee ordered the scene preserved overnight, posted warning signs, and scheduled 2 officers to rotate guard duty. The preliminary report went into the system with the note, "Missing subject last seen on own property." No evidence of departure by vehicle, no direct witnesses. The temporary case file was opened as ND 2011-122. As patrol lights swept the yard, their red and blue glow reflected off the snow and up onto the window where Eleanor stood motionless, while the garage door hung open, its bulb flickering and the radio crackling against the howling North Dakota wind. Once backup arrived and the scene was fully locked down, Larrabee moved straight into the search phase. He directed a fan-pattern sweep outward from the Kane house. 6 deputies and 2 rescue techs split into 3 teams, equipped with headlamps and radios to move through the heavy snow. McCarran set up command inside the mobile unit, coordinating data from thermal imagers and area maps. A K9 unit was called in from Minot, 2 dogs trained to track human scent in blizzard conditions. Wind gusted harder. Headlamp beams only reached a few yards before disappearing into whiteout. Teams followed their assigned sectors, checking open ground, fences, and the drainage ditch out back. Thermal scanners picked up plenty of small low-heat signatures, rabbits mostly, but nothing the size of a human body. McCarran logged coordinates constantly and relayed negative, no new findings from the North team. The empty field stretched forever, broken only by steel fences and abandoned oil drums. Wind screaming through pipes sounded like metal clanging. More than once someone stopped to check, only to find cold iron and snow. Larrabee and 2 deputies circled the garage again, confirming no adult footprints, no drag marks, no tire tracks leaving the property. They flagged the fence line with reflective stakes and pushed the radius another 200 meters east toward the main county road. Floodlights on the specialty rigs threw huge pools of light around the house, making the blowing snow sparkle like metal dust. Temperature plummeted to -20, gusts hit force 8, radios started cutting in and out. The dogs kept losing the scent and had to rest. Visibility collapsed. Larrabee called everyone back, had them mark everything they'd covered, and pulled the plug for the night. McCarran updated the system. No sign of subject movement within 600 meters, no tire tracks or foreign objects. The teams regrouped at the command truck, breath clouding thick in the air. They agreed to stand down to protect personnel and preserve the scene for a daylight search. Search gear powered down one by one until only fixed floodlights remained on the little house, swallowed by darkness. Larrabee signed the initial report, confirming suspension of operations at 0300 hours due to extreme weather and visibility under 10 meters. Tape was tightened, signs posted at the road entrance, and when the last unit rolled out, the scene sank into the absolute silence of a North Dakota winter night. Nothing but wind-whipping power lines and a faint antenna rattle in the dark. The next morning, as first light struggled through thick frost fog, the Williams County forensics team arrived to process the scene. Temperature still -10, light flurries dusting the preserved yard. Larrabee and McCarran handed the area over to the techs and ordered the garage left untouched until fully documented. Lead technician Brent Kessler started with full panoramic photos of the entire property: front of the house, snowy path, garage door, back fence. Every angle was shot in stills and video, with numbered coordinates for 3D reconstruction later. Tire tracks made by patrol units overnight were sprayed with reflective paint to distinguish them from anything relevant. Kessler and his two assistants then examined every contact point around the garage: hinges, handles, frame, no pry marks, no forced entry. Inside, the overhead bulb lit a flat concrete floor dusted with fine paint and oil residue. A metal workbench sat left, two spare fuel cans, and a wooden coat rack on the right. In the center, a folding chair and the little radio still plugged in and playing faint static. Kessler used a laser measure for exact distances, 4.6 meters from door to workbench, for the official diagram. The deep cold meant almost no visible footprints or biological traces. The garage air was dry, smelling only of oil and metal, nothing out of place. Every tool was inventoried and photographed in place for later comparison. Larrabee oversaw everything, ordering an initial evidence list: flashlight, radio, gloves hanging on a hook, workbench, 2 fuel cans. After 4 straight hours, the team finished a detailed scene diagram signed off by Kessler and McCarran. Larrabee ordered a temporary wind-breaking tarp wall around the garage to maintain interior conditions in case further analysis was needed. The whole property was then fully sealed with tape, time-stamped, dated, and signed by the on-scene commander. Once forensics left, Larrabee and McCarran returned to the Williams County Sheriff's headquarters to build the official case file. All data from the night and morning was uploaded, physical items transferred to the lab. Larrabee created permanent file ND 2011-122, initially classified missing person, active investigation. He reviewed the information list and had McCarran compile the victim background. Records showed Mark Kane, born 1964 in Fargo. Electronics engineering graduate, currently under contract with a Bakken oil field equipment supplier. Described as quiet, worked alone, no criminal record, no debts. Assets: jointly owned house in Williston, a silver Ford F-150 pickup, 2 bank accounts, a $200,000 life insurance policy, and legal ownership of 3 registered firearms. McCarran pulled the weapons registry: 1 Smith & Wesson .38 revolver, 1 Remington 870 shotgun, 1 small caliber Ruger, all up to date, never reported missing. DMV confirmed the F-150 had no tickets in the last 2 years. The power company showed normal steady usage, nothing odd in the days prior. Larrabee requested employment data. Mark's company confirmed he had taken 2 personal days off, starting the day before, for equipment maintenance. Everything was entered into the electronic file with ID photos pulled from his driver's license. Address, coordinates, surrounding area description updated from that morning's forensics report. McCarran added initial weather and environmental notes plus the scene location map. Larrabee approved the opening section and submitted the case to the federal NCIC system. A federal tracking number was auto-assigned with victim description, disappearance time, and reporting jurisdiction. Entry confirmed complete at 11:28 a.m. Once registered, the file was shared with civilian search and rescue and state police units. McCarran added Eleanor Kane under contacts as reporting party and primary family point of contact. Scene summary, photos, and evidence list were attached as a signed PDF from Kessler. Summary note: male victim, age 47, left residence during snowstorm, location unknown. Scene secured and preserved, awaiting physical evidence analysis. Larrabee reviewed everything for consistency between the initial report and the federal entry, marked Phase 1 complete, retained scene command authority, and notified the state police chief directly. Before leaving the office, McCarran printed 3 hard copies, 1 for county archives, 1 for the forensics lab, 1 for state records. Case file ND 2011-122 was sealed at the front, stamped open December 13, 2011, Commander Wes Larrabee. Outside, snow still fell lightly, streets empty, oil truck headlights flashing across the window and glinting off the fresh case folder on the desk. Mark Kane's disappearance had officially become a coded, documented investigation, the first step in a long paper trail recorded line by line in the administrative system of the state of North Dakota. After the ND 2011-122 case file was fully registered, Larrabee requested that McCarran conduct a verification of the GPS location data for the Ford F-150 pickup truck owned by Mark Kane. The vehicle was recorded as having remained parked on the property since the night of the disappearance, but to precisely confirm its travel history, McCarran contacted the manufacturer's GPS service center and submitted a request to extract data from the onboard tracking device using the VIN number. The technical department accepted the request, opened access to the Ford Pass system, and downloaded the complete movement history for the most recent 2 weeks. The dataset was decoded into a coordinate chart displaying every stop, distance traveled, and engine start time. McCarran and a data specialist analyzed it using internal mapping software and determined that the last time the engine was started was at 7:12 p.m. on December 12, 2011. A time that matched the window Eleanor had stated Mark left the house for the garage. The map showed the vehicle's only stationary position within the backyard area, with no indication of movement outside the property and no subsequent travel data. The GPS signal indicated that after 1930, the tracking device remained active but recorded no change in coordinates, meaning the truck stayed motionless until the power automatically shut off at 22:10 p.m. Due to the idle timeout system, McCarran cross-referenced this data with the household power consumption report and the time the garage radio signal was lost. The timings aligned perfectly. From the federal database, she requested access to traffic camera footage along Route 2 and Highway 85 within a 5-mile radius of the Kane residence. Footage from that night was almost entirely unusable due to blizzard conditions obscuring visibility, but frames between 18 o'clock and 23 o'clock showed no sign of Mark's license plate. This evidence reinforced the preliminary conclusion that the F-150 never left the property after that afternoon. The technician added a note, "No remote unlock or key start events detected from 1912 onward." McCarran printed the GPS chart, overlaid it with ground-level photographs, and prepared a technical report titled Vehicle Location Verification. In the report, she detailed the sequence. 1 engine start at 1912, 2 engine stop at 1914, 3 tracking device, transmitting stationary signal at coordinates, in 48°0921, W 103°3847, for the following 180 minutes, 4 system auto shutdown at 22 o'clock due to inactivity. All data was compressed and saved to the evidence drive under code PVT01. Larrabee reviewed the printout, signed it, and added the note, "Victim unable to leave via personal vehicle, voluntary departure scenario ruled out." Simultaneously, McCarran forwarded a copy of the report to the technical division for archiving in the federal investigation system. At headquarters, the large screen displayed a map of Williston overlaid with GPS, weather, and restricted area layers. Larrabee ordered a dedicated map layer created for ND 2011-122 to support subsequent analysis steps. Dispatch updated the case status from missing person report to open scene investigation. Technical officers completed cross-checks with the state vehicle registry, confirming plate 4 BF238 was registered to Mark Kane, with no reports of unauthorized use. The final compiled data recorded vehicle stationary at residence from 1912 on December 12, 2011. No movement, no unlock events, no subsequent engine start. The report was filed in ND 2011-122 under Vehicle and Mobility Data, becoming the first technical evidence clearly establishing the victim's movement limitations in the disappearance. Based on these findings, and with the vehicle confirmed never to have left the area, Larrabee immediately directed McCarran to launch a perimeter canvass within a 1-mile radius of the Kane residence. The southern outskirts of Williston were sparsely populated, consisting mainly of scattered manufactured homes, separated by hundreds of yards of open prairie. The investigation team split into 2 groups, one led by McCarran heading north, the other moving west along the dirt access road toward the main route. They went door to door, presenting credentials and asking for any unusual observations from the night of December 12th. Most residents reported hearing or seeing nothing because of the high winds and heavy snow. However, one man living approximately 400 yards away, Walter Crenshaw, stated that sometime after 7 p.m., he heard a sound like metal dropping or a small bang carried on the wind. Crenshaw saw no unusual lights or movement. He only recalled the sound echoing twice before fading. McCarran documented the statement, marked the witness's location on the map, and estimated the sound direction aligned with the Kane garage. An elderly woman, living to the east, reported flickering power that night. Her lights went out for a few minutes, but came back quickly, and she did not go outside to check. 2 other households confirmed the weather was so bad they never opened their doors after dark. The team also surveyed the dirt road leading to the highway, looking for any tire tracks preserved in the older ice layer, but found none. At the nearest gas station, nearly 2 miles from the scene, the night shift employee provided security camera data. However, frames between 18 o'clock and 22 o'clock were completely obscured by falling snow, making vehicle identification impossible. McCarran compiled a list of 8 indirect witnesses, each briefly interviewed, audio recorded, and signed. No one had seen Mark or the Ford F-150 leave the area. The technical unit added a sound propagation map, confirming the audible range under force 8 wind conditions. The sound Crenshaw reported matched both distance and direction to the garage. Larrabee reviewed the results, ordered cross-checking against the final GPS shutdown time, and noted the 2 markers were virtually identical. He considered that sound the only potential lead within the disappearance window. To ensure nothing was missed, McCarran expanded the search radius another mile south to the boundary of an abandoned oil field. 2 teams were dispatched on specialized all-terrain vehicles carrying metal detectors and thermal scanners. The area was vast, littered with old pipelines and rusted tanks. Wind caused metal to clank and echo similarly to the witness report. She noted in her log, clanging could be industrial structures, but other possibilities not yet ruled out. By the time they returned, another 4 inches of snow had fallen, erasing nearly all surface traces. Larrabee ordered the first canvass round concluded for the day, and all statements, scene photos, and sound map data compiled. The preliminary report concluded, no direct witnesses to the incident. Single anomalous sound recorded within the disappearance timeframe, direction consistent with garage area. The case file logged these results under Field Interview Summary, numbered FS01 through FS08. McCarran uploaded all recordings and transcripts to the server with internal access lock. As she left the area, she glanced back at the snow-covered road connecting the silent small homes. Everything appeared undisturbed, no signs of disturbance, only the cold emptiness of wind and snow, where people say you can hear metal echoing from far away without ever seeing its source. 2 days after completing the perimeter canvass, Larrabee and McCarran summoned Eleanor Kane to the Williams County Sheriff's headquarters for the first formal interview. She arrived on time, wearing a gray sweater, hair tied back, face pale from lack of sleep. The session was audio and video recorded per standard procedure. McCarran began by confirming personal information and reading the voluntary cooperation advisory. Eleanor agreed, her voice slightly hoarse. She recounted her schedule for December 12th sequentially, morning piano lessons at home, 2 students, midday grocery run, afternoon cooking. Mark returned around 18:30 after stopping by the company office to pick up items. They ate dinner together, briefly discussed the approaching storm, then he went to the garage to check the generator. Eleanor said that while Mark went outside, she was washing dishes with the kitchen radio on and not watching the clock. When she noticed the garage light still on after a long time, she called out with no answer, went to look, and called police. McCarran asked for more precise timelines. Eleanor said the last time she saw Mark was around 7, maybe a little after. She remembered the garage radio still playing the old music program Mark liked. McCarran asked if she heard any unusual sounds. Eleanor shook her head, saying only wind and the light banging of the door, no bangs or strange noises. Larrabee asked about Mark's usual garage habits. Eleanor replied, he typically took a flashlight and gloves, sometimes turned the radio loud to cover machine noise. She insisted Mark never left the house at night unless work required it. When asked about their relationship, she said it was normal. No conflicts, only a recent minor disagreement about fixing the electrical system. McCarran asked her to confirm the time she called police. Eleanor said around 9:30, but dispatch logs showed the call at 21:54, a discrepancy of nearly 25 minutes. When McCarran pointed this out, Eleanor paused several seconds, then said panic may have distorted her sense of time. McCarran noted minor timeline inconsistency. Next, she asked if anyone else visited that day. The answer was no. Larrabee shifted to assets. Did Mark have a cell phone? Eleanor confirmed yes, but it was still on the kitchen counter. Carrier data showed Mark's last outgoing call at 1822 to the company office number, with no further activity. McCarran presented this. Eleanor looked at her hands, nodded silently. The next portion focused on Mark's firearms habits. Eleanor said her husband kept guns locked in the office cabinet and rarely took them out. When McCarran asked if Mark ever brought a gun to the garage, she answered, no, unless cleaning them. Larrabee noted that background reports listed permits for 3 firearms, yet Eleanor described only 2. She hesitated, then said, the smaller one might be in the cabinet. Investigator note flagged inaccurate information regarding third weapon. The interview lasted over 3 hours. McCarran kept questions neutral, primarily to establish the timeline. At the end, she summarized, Mark left the house around 7. Eleanor was in the kitchen, heard no strange sounds, no outsiders, called police, after nearly 3 hours. Eleanor signed the transcript and was advised on contact procedures for new information. As she left the room, McCarran gathered documents and added to the record, statement consistent regarding behavior, but minor inconsistencies in reporting time and household weapons status. Larrabee reviewed the video and noted cooperative and composed demeanor, but signs of withholding details. The transcript was entered into ND 2011-122 under Witness Interview 01. Case status remained open investigation, continuing evidence collection. After completing archiving, McCarran closed the file in the system and glanced at the clock. 17:08, another day gone. Since the investigation officially began revolving around the woman waiting for news of her husband in the snow-covered house on the edge of Williston. 2 days after the first formal interview, McCarran returned to the scene with the forensic team for a supplemental examination of the garage area at Larrabee's direction. The objective was a detailed sweep of the floor and structures that might have been missed during the initial search. Snow had partially melted, and temperatures had risen slightly, improving access. The area remained sealed, caution tape intact, garage door secured. Before entry, Kessler, the forensic team leader, rechecked the seal log, verifying signatures and times. Seals showed no tampering. After unlocking, they turned on lights, ventilated for several minutes, then began continuous video documentation of the current state. The garage appeared virtually unchanged since the first search. Metal workbench, tool racks, oil cans, old radio. However, in daylight, Kessler noticed a color discrepancy on the concrete floor in the rear right corner. He pointed it out to McCarran. They approached together. That section was darker gray, smoother, and less dusty than surrounding areas, covering roughly 1.5 square meters. Kessler measured elevation and found the surface slightly raised, about 2 centimeters higher than adjacent floor. Tapping with a rubber mallet produced a solid, dull sound unlike the hollow echo elsewhere. He noted, "High probability this concrete section was poured recently." A technician used a surface temperature scanner. The suspect area retained slightly more heat, indicating newer material than the original floor. McCarran photographed close-ups of every angle with a metal ruler for scale, numbering each image. Kessler used a specialty blade to extract 3 small core samples from the seam edges, each roughly 2 centimeters in diameter, sealed into tubes coded FX07, FX08, FX09. He also requested soil samples from both sides of the wall-foot junction in case of seepage or foreign material analysis. Another technician performed adhesive dust lifts across the surface, collecting fine particles mixed in the smooth concrete. The entire process was recorded continuously from 2 camera angles. McCarran prepared the log entry. Southeast garage floor section exhibits clear differences in color and structure, suspected post-original construction repair. Meanwhile, Larrabee radioed from headquarters requesting exact area measurements and coordinates for the scene map update. Kessler used a laser measure, center point located 4.3 meters from the door and 2.1 meters from the rear wall. Data was entered directly into digital map ND 2011-122 FM. After sampling, the team sealed all cuts with protective compound, marked the area with yellow glow paint, and placed a small sign sampled area. "Do not disturb." McCarran added an appendix to the log detailing personnel, start-end times, concrete condition, and descriptions of textures, color variances. Kessler signed and applied the forensics lab stamp. All samples were transferred to a mobile evidence locker in the transport vehicle for delivery to the Materials Analysis Center in Bismarck. Before departure, McCarran rechecked old seal points to ensure garage integrity post-procedure. The door was resecured with a new lock, seals reapplied along with warning signage. As the team left, snow began falling again, wind whipping fine powder across the marked concrete. The supplemental scene report was completed, containing 27 digital technical photos, 3 concrete samples, 2 soil samples, and 1 measurement log. McCarran's final on-site note: require composition analysis and pour date estimation of concrete to determine anomaly. Case file ND 2011-122 was updated with new status, adding section secondary scene examination. Approved and signed by Larrabee on December 18, 2011, officially documenting that the Kane garage contained a floor structure section inconsistent with the original design. Right after the technical team finished resurveying the garage and transferring the samples back to the Central Analysis Lab, McCarran returned to headquarters to continue cross-referencing meteorological data for the time of the disappearance. Larrabee requested full verification of all information related to weather conditions between 18 o'clock and 23 o'clock on December 12, 2011. Since most of the initial hypotheses rested on the possibility that Mark Kane had wandered off and gotten lost in a blizzard, McCarran contacted the National Weather Service branch in Bismarck and requested retrieval of radar data, barometric pressure, wind speed, and snowfall amounts for the Williston area that night. The detailed report that came back showed weather conditions were only at a light advisory level, northeast winds at force 5, average temperature of -16 degrees, snowfall approximately 3 centimeters per hour. Nowhere near the threshold for a local blizzard. The radar system also recorded no unusual cold air surges within a 15-mile radius of the Kane residence coordinates. McCarran compared this with data collected from the automated observation station at Williston Airport. 8 miles from the scene, the highest wind speed recorded was 28 miles per hour. At 20:05, then gradually decreasing through the night. No gusts exceeded the 35 miles per hour threshold, necessary to completely obliterate adult footprints in fresh snow. The report also noted that the snow surface at the time was dry with a loose granular structure, not thick enough to cover movement tracks in a short period. These data directly contradicted Eleanor's original statement that the wind was very strong and the snow was falling so heavily you couldn't see anything outside. McCarran compiled a comparison table between the sources, highlighting clear discrepancies in two areas: wind speed and snow cover visibility. She asked the GIS department to integrate the meteorological data into the incident map ND 2011-122 for visual display. On the screen, the 3D weather model showed that the wind impact that evening was limited to the open fields west of the property and did not extend to the Kane House area. Preliminary conclusion: insufficient meteorological conditions to completely erase all physical traces on the property and in the backyard. Larrabee read the summary and requested additional satellite ground temperature data to determine the timing of surface freezing. NOAA satellite imagery recorded at 21 o'clock showed an average ground temperature of -18 degrees, stable throughout the night. This proved the snow had not melted and refrozen. Therefore, any footprints or movement marks made before 21 o'clock would have remained at least until the following morning. The complete absence of any prints at the scene further undermined the hypothesis that the victim had left the house. McCarran incorporated all findings into a 6-page meteorological analysis report, attaching wind speed graphs, snowfall charts, and radar maps. In the conclusion section, she wrote clearly, "No recorded blizzard or winds strong enough to cause complete loss of tracks. Weather conditions stable, posing no risk of disorientation for the victim." The report was forwarded to Larrabee for signature and filed under Environmental Data Review in case ND 2011-122. He added an internal note: "Assumption that victim became lost in a blizzard lacks scientific basis." At the same time, the technical lab completed synchronization of meteorological data with the vehicle's GPS data, confirming both sources indicated static conditions. McCarran updated the investigation status in the system and moved the file to the expanded analysis phase. When the area map appeared on screen, the overlaid data layers, garage location, vehicle coordinates, wind charts, all pointed to the same conclusion on the night Mark Kane vanished. There was no blizzard, no wind strong enough to erase the traces of an adult leaving the yard. She saved the entire file to the evidence drive under code WTH 2011, then turned off the office lights. The glow from the monitor still fell across the case folder that was steadily thickening with each new page of technical data. 3 weeks after the incident was recorded, all initial phase investigation data for case ND 2011-122 was compiled at Williams County headquarters to produce a consolidated report. McCarran was responsible for drafting it. Larrabee personally reviewed it before it was sent to the state police office. The report opened with a list of information sources collected from December 12 to January 2. Vehicle GPS data, perimeter search results, witness statements, meteorological analysis, and 2 crime scene examinations. Each item included appendices and signed verification forms from the relevant units. The consolidated findings showed no signs of forced entry, break-in, or obvious criminal activity on the Kane property. Area security systems recorded no human or vehicle movement during the disappearance window. The Ford F-150 remained in place and unused. No footprints, drag marks, or foreign objects were found within a 600-meter radius of the house. Meteorological data proved weather conditions were insufficient to erase physical traces. The forensic team's conclusion regarding the anomalous concrete slab structure was still pending expert examination and held no definitive value yet. Neighbors only reported hearing unidentified sounds. No one saw Mark Kane leave the house. The victim's phone, bank, credit card, and email records showed no activity after December 12. McCarran presented a detailed timeline: 1830, Mark arrives home, 1912. Vehicle started and shut off, 1930, garage lights turned on, 2154. Eleanor calls police to report him missing, 22 o'clock, vehicle tracking system automatically disconnects. No other activity was recorded between 1930 and 2130. Based on all data, the investigation team reached a provisional conclusion that there was no evidence of criminal conduct and no indication the victim had left the scene. Larrabee wrote in the notes section, "Case contains unusual elements but insufficient grounds to classify as criminal at this time." McCarran's situation assessment stated clearly, no direction of travel, no biological evidence, no direct witnesses. In the conclusion section, she used the standard format, case status, presumed missing. The 12-page report, with 42 attached data files, was printed in 3 official copies. 1 copy remained at the county office, 1 was sent to the North Dakota State Police, and the 3rd was forwarded to the Cold Case Unit for periodic monitoring. Larrabee signed it on January 3, 2012, and stamped it preliminary phase completed. Per procedure, the file was moved to Williams County long-term storage under open undetermined cases. In the transmittal memo, Larrabee added a final line. Continue monitoring forensic results when available. Maintain contact with the reporting party. Do not rule out possibility victim left voluntarily. When the documents were digitized into the central system, code ND 2000-11-122 changed status from active investigation to monitoring case. McCarran completed the backup to the evidence drive, sealed the hard copy, and placed it in storage cabinet B, slot 42. Outside, January winds blew down the hallway, carrying a thin layer of snow that stuck to the glass. Larrabee closed the folder and looked down at the italicized line. Presumed missing, Kane, Mark 1964, 2011. After 3 weeks of fruitless investigation, the disappearance officially entered a waiting period for new information, and the small house on the outskirts of Williston returned to the cold, biting silence typical of a North Dakota plains winter. After the initial consolidated report was completed and signed, case ND 2000-11-122 was officially transferred to the Cold Case Unit in Bismarck in early February 2012, under standard procedure for missing persons cases, with no progress. The file contained all scene reports, photographs, GPS data, meteorological results, and samples collected during the 2 garage examinations. Each section was coded and individually sealed with security tape, bearing the signatures of Sheriff Wes Larrabee and Technician Brent Kessler. 4 boxes of documents and 2 containers of samples were transported by dedicated vehicle to Storage Vault 3 of the unit, located in the basement of the Bismarck Forensic Center. The transfer receipt stated, "Case status, presumed missing evidence, not yet subjected to advanced testing. Concrete samples, awaiting analysis conditions." Electronic documents were backed up to the internal data system under archive number BCU 3127-2011. From 2012 through 2019, the file remained on the periodic review list and was checked once a year along with similar missing persons cases in the northern part of the state. Every annual Cold Case Unit review contained the same comment, "No new leads, evidence intact." Material testing was never prioritized due to higher priority criminal cases. The concrete and soil samples from the garage remained in cold storage at a steady 4 degrees Celsius, seals never broken. Scene photographs and survey videos were copied to 2 backup hard drives and kept in the secure data system. Occasionally, the unit received information requests from the public or media about Mark Kane's disappearance, but all were denied on grounds that the file was in pending update status. Eleanor Kane left Williston in 2013. Her registered address changed to Dickinson, and she communicated with investigators through her attorney when required. The 2015 tracking report noted, "No additional communication from reporting party." That same year, the NCIC system automatically refreshed the data, keeping the federal file open with no new transactions or identifications related to the victim. In 2017, the Cold Case Unit conducted a full evidence vault inventory. ND 2000-11-122 remained unchanged, seals intact. No additional testing requested. The year-end inventory report from the supervisor contained the line, "Case inactive, status unchanged, since 2012. Inside the vault, the faded blue folder labeled Kane Mark, ND 2000-11-122, sat on shelf C, slot 41, among hundreds of old, closed investigation files. Outside, neon lights reflected off the metal boxes marked by year, creating a cold, silent atmosphere. From time to time, a technician would open the vault to check humidity levels, record the readings, then lock it again without moving anything. For 7 years there were no new reports, no new witnesses, no sign of the victim resurfacing, and no evidence that altered the original conclusion. Case ND 2011-122 continued to sit undisturbed under cold storage. Unresolved cases, marked as one of the longest-running no-progress disappearances in the Williston, North Dakota area. In early 2020, during a routine review program of all open cold files at the Bismarck Cold Case Unit, Inspector Morgan Rainey was assigned to evaluate cases pending more than 10 years with no developments. She chose to start with files that still had evidence awaiting modern testing, especially missing persons cases showing environmental or structural inconsistencies at the scene. While browsing the archive catalog, Rainey noticed code ND 2011-122, the disappearance of Mark Kane in Williston, because a 2012 supervisor note read, "Concrete and soil samples never analyzed due to equipment limitations." That matched the exact criteria she was targeting: construction material that could retain DNA or artificial chemical traces detectable with new scanning technology. Rainey pulled the entire electronic file and opened the original investigation reports by investigator Haley McCarran and Sheriff Wes Larrabee. She carefully reviewed every scene photo, diagram, and record. Kessler's note about the different colored concrete slab made her pause longer. She flagged that section in the digital report. Rainey compiled a table of unresolved data points: the suspected freshly poured area, strange sounds the night of the disappearance, and actual weather that contradicted the witness statement. She judged these 3 factors sufficient to justify reopening the case. On February 10, 2020, Rainey drafted an internal memo requesting reactivation of ND 2011-122 and submitted it to Cold Case Unit Command. The request was approved the same week due to the well-preserved samples and the availability of new material analysis technology at the central lab. Per procedure, Rainey needed background from the original lead investigator. She contacted Wes Larrabee, now retired and living in Fargo. The phone conversation was documented. Larrabee confirmed the Kane case was one that still felt unfinished to him because no specific cause was ever found. He said everything appeared reasonable but never convincing, and he had personally suspected something about the garage but lacked legal grounds to excavate at the time. Rainey recorded the details and asked Larrabee to send the original 2011 scene maps and any handwritten reports he still had for comparison. He agreed to mail everything from his personal storage. At the same time, Rainey checked personnel files. McCarran had transferred to the State Bureau of Investigation. Kessler was still at the Forensic Center and willing to assist. She emailed Kessler requesting confirmation of the concrete sample's condition and feasibility of analysis with the new spectral scanning equipment. The reply was positive. Samples remained sealed with sufficient volume for both chemical structure and biological trace testing. Rainey immediately updated her progress report to command and proposed reopening the scene if a supplemental search warrant could be obtained. On February 22, the Cold Case Unit issued the order to restart ND 2011-122, assigning Rainey as lead investigator. She created a new workspace in the system, reloaded all data files, and changed the case status to active review. Her initial action plan had 3 steps: verify current scene location, assess garage structural condition, and prepare non-invasive survey equipment. Rainey contacted the Williams County Office for current property ownership information on the house. Records showed the Kane residence had been foreclosed in 2014 for lack of heirs and was now state-owned and vacant. That simplified access, no complicated civil process required. Rainey prepared a warrant application to the Williams County Court for non-destructive surveying to evaluate the structure before deciding whether to break seals. The attached plan described the objective: survey garage concrete floor with ground-penetrating radar to detect anomalies or voids beneath the slab. The submission included the justification for reactivation, untested concrete samples, scene still capable of yielding traces, and original conclusion lacking objective data. Larrabee, as a former investigator, included a handwritten letter of support, calling it a chance to finally close an unfinished file for Williams County. On March 3, 2020, the new scene survey plan was officially approved. Rainey scheduled work with Kessler and the Bismarck technical team and prepared to transport GPR units, thermal scanners, and recording systems to Williston within the week. Before leaving the office, she reopened the 2011 scene photos and paused on the image of the discolored patch that McCarran had annotated. The yellowish light streaking across the old concrete in that photograph made Rainey feel as though she were staring at something that had gone unanswered for nearly 9 years. 1 week after the plan was approved, the Cold Case Unit Task Force, led by Detective Morgan Rainey, traveled to Williston to re-examine the crime scene at the house formerly owned by Mark and Eleanor Kane. The house sat on the southern edge of town, abandoned for years, its windows boarded up, the corrugated metal roof, dulled with age, surrounded by overgrown weeds and a mix of sand and snow. The state property office handed over the keys, along with the official management documentation, to the investigative team. Before entering, Rainey and forensic technician Brent Kessler checked the old Williams County Sheriff's Office seals, confirming the security tape was still intact. They opened the garage door using specialized tools and powered temporary electricity through a generator to supply the ground-penetrating radar equipment. Inside, the space was cold and dry, with a lingering smell of old metal. All furniture had been removed after 2013, leaving only the concrete floor and a few oil stains. Kessler and 2 forensic engineers set up the GPR system, calibrated it to 400 MHz, and divided the floor into a grid of 50 by 50 centimeter squares, totaling 64 scan points. Rainey recorded time and position data while Kessler operated the device, scanning along parallel lines from the door to the back wall. Each pass produced a low, steady hum, and the screen displayed waveform graphs of the returns. The first several scans showed normal signals, uniform concrete with no obstructions. But on the 5th pass, in the southeast corner, the graph began showing an abnormal return curve with clearly different coloration. Kessler adjusted the depth setting. The return indicated a strongly reflective metal object, approximately 3 meters below the surface. He stopped, repeated the scan twice to verify accuracy. The data matched, an oval-shaped anomaly, dimensions 1.2 x 0.6 meters, high density, located in the same area marked as discolored concrete in 2011. Rainey noted anomaly confirmed and saved the radar images to memory. To rule out interference from pipes, the team checked the entire underground water and electrical system. No structures passed through that zone. The return profile was distinctly solid metal, not hollow pipe. Kessler used software to generate a 3D model showing the anomalous mass tilted about 15 degrees from horizontal, one end touching the wall, the other pointing toward the center of the garage. He turned to Rainey and confirmed, "There's a large metal object beneath the floor that does not belong to the original structure." She immediately ordered full video capture of the scan screens, photographs with measuring tapes and scan angles, and the area was marked with red tape and 2 reflective stakes. All data was exported to storage under code GPR-ND 122-2020. After completing all 64 scans, only the southeast corner showed a metal return at 3 meters depth. Rainey compiled the report, signed it, noting start time 9:20, end time 14:47, dry cold weather, temperature 4 degrees Celsius, equipment margin of error. The preliminary conclusion read, large metallic anomaly detected beneath garage floor, structure not part of original construction. Kessler recommended excavation to identify the object. Rainey agreed, but required a court order from Williams County. That same afternoon, she left the scene and returned to the local office to prepare the warrant application per legal procedure. The filing included the GPR report, images, coordinate maps, and state property office authorization. In the request to the district judge, Rainey stated clearly, scientific evidence exists of a metallic object, not part of the building structure, potentially related to the 2011 disappearance of Mark Kane. All technical evidence was submitted the same day. As she left the courthouse at dusk, she looked south, where the last light of the day filtered through cold clouds and reflected faintly off Williston's hazy outskirts. On her car laptop screen, the radar file replayed the deep blue return wave, a metal mass lying still 3 meters beneath the concrete, in the exact spot that 9 years earlier had been dismissed as ordinary repair work. 3 days after the warrant application was filed, Williams County Court officially approved excavation of the Kane garage, citing discovery of a suspicious metal structure potentially related to the 2011 missing person case. On the morning of March 10, 2020, the forensic team led by Detective Morgan Rainey returned to the scene with engineer Brent Kessler and state property office supervisors. The sky was overcast, temperature 3 degrees Celsius, patches of snow still clinging around the entrance. A new warning sign stood in front. Authorized personnel only. After checking the seals, Rainey read the excavation order aloud and authorized the start of core drilling. Kessler remarked the anomaly location using coordinates GPR-ND 122-2020 and divided the suspect area into 4 cutting quadrants. A large concrete core drill was brought in, fitted with a 10 cm bit running at 400 revolutions per minute, and test drilled at the edge of quadrant 1. The drill roared in the empty space as concrete dust was vacuumed into evidence bags. At approximately 25 centimeters depth, the concrete darkened and an industrial oil smell appeared. Kessler signaled a pause, inserted a metal detector probe, strong increasing signal. Drilling continued. At about 50 centimeters, the bit struck something hard with a distinctive metallic clink. Rainey ordered drilling stopped, and the surrounding surface widened with a concrete saw. After 30 minutes, a 1.2 square meters section was removed. Beneath lay densely compacted soil, mixed with oil and rust smells. The team switched to hand excavation with small shovels, removing 5 centimeters layers, while fixed cameras recorded everything. When the 5th layer was lifted, the top of a cylindrical metal drum appeared, surface heavily rusted red, diameter about 60 centimeters, lid facing downward. Kessler scanned it and confirmed it was a standard 55-gallon industrial oil drum made of old alloy steel. Rainey logged, metal drum detected, sealed orientation, depth 2.9 meters. The excavation shifted to evidence preservation mode. Wooden shoring was erected around the pit, vibration sensors installed to prevent collapse. The team widened the hole to expose the entire drum. Most of the original paint was gone, only faint letters, high DR remained. Kessler identified it as a drum formerly containing hydraulic fluid, common in auto shops from 2010. By 13 o'clock the lid was fully exposed, but fused to surrounding concrete and soil. 2 technicians carefully pried the metal retaining ring until it broke free. A rush of cold air escaped carrying a heavy iron rust odor. Rainey ordered a pause and called the biohazard team to test for chemicals or toxic gas. After clearance, they resumed. Inside was dark, filled with dark soil and unidentified material. Kessler lowered an endoscope camera. Images showed a hard, irregularly shaped object. Rainey ordered the lid temporarily reclosed, and the pit widened another 30 centimeters on each side to lift the drum intact. Lifting straps were threaded under the bottom and secured. A mobile crane from the specialty truck hoisted the drum out and placed it on clean plastic sheeting. The full drum was now visible, heavily rusted, caked with clay in places. Rainey photographed the entire process with sequential numbering. After removal, the empty pit was photographed again. Depth 2.96 m, bottom diameter 0.68 m. No additional objects were found within the excavated area. Kessler took 3 soil samples from the bottom, D1, D3, and temporarily covered the hole with waterproof sheeting. The drum was double-bagged in protective plastic wrapped in anti-static cloth and sealed with cold case unit evidence tape. Rainey signed the recovery log, noting completion at 1642. 2 ancillary items were also collected, a concrete rim fragment and the metal retaining ring. Everything was loaded into a wheeled stainless steel transport container and moved the same day to the Bismarck Forensic Center in a dedicated vehicle. Transport paperwork was signed by 3 parties: county court representative, lead investigator, and forensic engineer. As the truck left the property, the sun hung low, golden light spreading across the snow and reflecting off the damp concrete around the pit. Rainey looked through the window. The evidence drum sat secured in the rear, its red seal bright in the fading light. Outside, the prairie wind blew steadily through the rusted fence, carrying the dry, cold sound of things that had lain silent beneath the ground for nearly 9 years, now pulled back into the light for a new examination. The next morning at the Bismarck Forensic Center, the drum recovered from the Kane garage was brought into examination room 4 for seal removal and contents inspection. Detective Morgan Rainey was present with forensic engineer Brent Kessler, chief medical examiner Dr. Laura Metz, and 2 videographers. The procedure began at 9:10. The drum was placed on a stainless steel table, final seal integrity confirmed. Kessler used an industrial cutter to slice the metal ring around the lid. The shrill sound echoed in the sealed room. When the lid came off, a stale gust carrying heavy rust, damp earth, and a faint organic odor escaped. Inside lay dark soil mixed with fragments of rotted fabric and unidentified material. Technicians used small blades to separate layers into separate stainless trays. At about 20 centimeters depth, a section of bone appeared, curved, consistent with an adult humerus, gray-brown and mineralized from time. Dr. Metz halted work and visually confirmed, adult human bone. Rainey ordered close-up video and positional numbering per diagram. Continuing through the middle of the drum, the team uncovered rib cage and spinal structures neatly arranged, indicating the body had been carefully placed before burial. The skull lay tilted left, hands positioned close together. Near the bottom appeared a metal object approximately 25 centimeters long, soil-encrusted. Kessler gently brushed it clean, revealing a heavily rusted semi-automatic handgun frame. The serial number was mostly illegible, only partial T-38 visible. Beside the gun were 2 deformed lead bullets and 1 crushed brass casing. Metz collected each item into separate trays, labeled ID-01 through ID-03. Near the left-hand bones was a piece of thick dark brown leather with hand stitching, possibly a glove or small pouch. Kessler secured it as CL02. All soil in the drum was sieved through fine mesh. 1 additional item was recovered, a small metal zipper pull with plastic tab, typical of heavy winter jackets. Rainey cross-referenced the 2011 interview transcripts. Mark Kane was last seen wearing a thick gray coat with a matching zipper. Dr. Metz's preliminary assessment, male, skeletal age 45, 50. Consistent with the missing person's profile. The cranium showed 2 9 mm circular perforations in the occipital and temporal regions, with radiating fracture lines and slight burn rimming characteristic of close-range gunshot wounds. Rainey requested immediate on-site X-rays to determine bullet trajectory. Results displayed 2 projectiles traveled right to left on a downward angle from back to front, paths nearly parallel, indicating 2 rapid shots at very close range. Metz's initial conclusion, probable cause of death, multiple gunshot wound. All bones were removed in anatomical order, placed in sterile trays, photographed, and measured. Fabric fragments were sealed separately. Drum soil samples were taken for chemical analysis of oil and preservative content. After full processing, Kessler logged. Recovered remains. Adult male skeleton, associated firearm SW-38. 2 bullet fragments, 1 casing, personal fabric item. Rainey prepared a separate report detailing findings, times, participants, and evidence condition. She opened case file ND 2011-122 in the system and changed the status from presumed missing to homicide investigation. active case. Her note read, based on remains, firearm, and projectiles recovered from Kane garage exhibiting clear criminal indicators, case transferred to homicide investigation. The entire process was recorded continuously and saved as raw vid 0310. Dr. Metz collected DNA samples from femur, teeth, and soil around the neck area for the genetics lab. Results comparing to Mark Kane's existing dental records were expected within 48 hours. Upon completion, Rainey signed the final line of the evidence log. Contents consistent with human remains, case reclassified. The empty drum was cleaned, final sealed, and stored in Category A evidence vault, along with the aluminum bone cases. The room fell quiet, except for the steady hum of the air filtration system. Rainey looked down at the name tag, now placed on the reassembled skeleton on the table. A man who vanished in the winter of 2011, now returned through traces of metal and rust. She closed the case folder and added one final short line that marked the turning point of the entire investigation. Case ND 2011-122, reclassified, homicide investigation, March 11, 2020. 2 days after the oil drum was opened and the evidence recovered, the genetics lab at the Bismarck State Forensic Center completed the DNA analysis. The official report was delivered to Detective Morgan Rainey on the morning of March 13, 2020, confirming that the genetic sequence extracted from the femur and teeth matched exactly the reference DNA profile in Mark Kane's missing person file, with a statistical error rate of less than 1 in 10 million. Chief Medical Examiner Laura Metz signed the identity confirmation section, formally closing the identification phase. With the results in hand, Rainey reopened file ND 2011-122 and updated the entry to identification confirmed. That same day, a full forensic autopsy was conducted. Metz led the examination in the autopsy suite, attended by Rainey, forensic engineer Brent Kessler, and 2 assistants. The skull was placed on the stainless steel table and examined visually and under a light microscope. 2 circular defects, one in the right occipital region, the other in the left temporal area, measured 9.05 mm and 9.12 mm in diameter respectively, with slight beveling and rifling marks around the edges. Metal probes established the trajectories. Both rounds traveled right to left, downward at a 17-degree angle, passing through the base of the skull and exiting near the left ear. The degree of beveling and bone deformation indicated shots fired from less than 1 meter away, close range. A 3D reconstruction from laser scan data perfectly matched the locations of the 2 spent shell casings recovered inside the drum. Kessler compared the fragments to the Smith & Wesson .38 special revolver found with the remains. Though heavily rusted, the barrel rifling was still intact enough for ballistic comparison. The striation match was positive on 7 of 8 lands and grooves, sufficient to conclude that both bullet fragments were fired from that exact firearm. The ballistics lab's official finding read, weapon and bullet fragments consistent with same firearm. Metz continued with the ribs and vertebrae and found no additional trauma, meaning the victim had not been struck or beaten before death. There were no defensive fractures in the arms or forearms, suggesting the victim was either immobilized or taken completely by surprise. In her descriptive report, Metz wrote, parallel gunshot wounds, right to left direction, close range, no evidence of resistance, instantaneous death likely. Time of death was estimated from the degree of mineralization and the condition of remaining soft tissue, approximately 8 to 9 years prior to discovery, corresponding to late 2011, exactly matching the date Mark Kane was reported missing. Soil samples from inside the drum contained high levels of hydrocarbons and industrial oil additives, confirming the body had been sealed in an oxygen-deprived environment, which explained the relatively good bone preservation. The chemistry lab also detected traces of Quikrete, an industrial rapid-set concrete widely sold in Williston at the time. Metz compiled all findings into a 24-page final autopsy report. The summary page read, Subject Kane Mark, identification confirmed, via DNA. Cause of death, 2 gunshot wounds to the head. Manner of death, homicide. Estimated time of death, December 2011. Copies were sent to Rainey and the state prosecutor. Rainey signed for receipt at 1625. Read every line, paused at manner of death, homicide, then added her own note. Transition to active homicide case confirmed by forensic results. Kessler transferred the physical evidence, revolver, bullet fragments, cloth scraps, and jacket zipper, into secure Category A, storage under new seal HC0313. Rainey prepared an investigative summary for the cold case unit, clearly outlining the DNA match, bullet trajectories, and forensic conclusion of homicide. At the end of the document she wrote, forensic findings support the hypothesis that the victim was shot twice, at close range, with his own personal firearm. No indicators of suicide, body position and burial method indicate concealment. Upon submission, case ND 2011-122 was officially reclassified, active homicide investigation. Outside, light March snow fell on the roof of the forensic center, reflecting off the glass where the words North Dakota State Forensic Laboratory were etched in bold letters. Inside her office, Rainey set the final report on her desk and tapped the last line of her own note, cause of death, gunshot, 2 rounds through the skull, victim Mark Kane. Forensic conclusion, confirms homicide. Immediately after the autopsy established death by gunfire, Detective Morgan Rainey shifted focus to analyzing the surrounding burial materials in an attempt to trace the origin of the soil and concrete inside the drum. The materials analysis lab at the Bismarck Forensic Center received 4 samples, soil from inside the drum and concrete, scraped from the edges of the garage excavation pit. The samples were compared for mineral structure, particle size distribution, and chemical composition. A preliminary report from the materials engineer showed that the drum soil had sand, clay, and dolomite ratios nearly identical to native Williston area soil and distinctly different from soil in the western part of the state. Spectroscopic analysis revealed high cacophene content plus organic material mixed with industrial oil, typical of garage floor dirt. Microscopic comparison found that particles from inside the drum and from the garage floor matched at 98%, especially in iron impurities and hydraulic oil residue. The technical conclusion was unequivocal. Soil originated from the same location, most likely excavated directly from the garage floor. Concrete analysis was conducted in parallel. Sample FX10 from the excavation edge was pulverized and compared against construction product databases for 2008-2013. Results identified the presence of Quikrete industrial polymer additive, batch Qcrete 2011A, sold in 22 kg bags. This specific formulation was distributed only in the Williston area during the final quarter of 2011 for residential repair jobs. According to records from supplier Midwest Construction Supply, only 43 bags were sold in December 2011 to 5 customers total. Rainey requested the full sales invoices for that period. One receipt immediately stood out, dated December 14, 2011. Purchaser Eleanor Kane. Address 47 South Prairie Road, Williston. The exact address of the crime scene house. Items purchased: 4 bags of Quikrete, Qcrete 2011A and 1 metal shovel, paid in cash. A scanned copy of the signed receipt still existed in the store's archives. Rainey photocopied it and added it to case ND 2011-122 under material evidence. To rule out a name coincidence, she contacted the state tax office and confirmed the ID number on file belonged to Eleanor Kane, born 1966. This proved the woman had purchased the only concrete that matched the layer covering the spot where the body was found. The materials lab further aged the concrete by hydration level and carbonation ratio, yielding a pour date between mid-December 2011 and January 2012. 3 weeks, perfectly aligned with Mark Kane's disappearance window. Kessler added that the concrete contained traces of light gray floor paint with iron oxide 32 pigment, the exact decorative garage floor paint sold at the same store. Rainey compiled everything into a 3-column comparison chart: source material, invoice, physical sample. All 3 columns aligned by date, product, and technical characteristics. The final materials report, signed March 18, 2020, stated, concrete and soil recovered from the scene originate from the Kane residence garage. Quickcrete 2crete, 2011A additive matches type and production batch of product purchased by Eleanor Kane on December 14, 2011 at Midwest Construction Supply. Attached were the invoice copy, batch code photos, and detailed chemical charts. Rainey added the full packet to the master file with a brief note. Material results support the hypothesis that the scene was deliberately altered shortly after the disappearance. Copies were forwarded to the Cold Case Unit and State Prosecutor for Tier 1 physical evidence review. As she left the lab, she paused at the glass and looked at the concrete samples sealed in red-tagged stainless trays next to the dark soil bags labeled D1, D3. Inanimate objects, yet through their numbers and composition, they were reconstructing the past detail by detail, from the garage floor to the oil drum. Everything pointed to a single conclusion. The burial material came from the very house where Mark Kane vanished nearly 9 years earlier. Once soil and concrete analysis confirmed the materials came from the Kane garage, Detective Morgan Rainey turned to the electronic evidence seized back in 2011. In the Cold Case Unit archive, she located Mark Kane's sealed personal hard drive, tag PC Kane 01. The drive was transferred to the Digital Forensics Lab at the Bismarck Forensic Center, which specializes in recovering data from obsolete storage. Computer forensic examiner Andrew Cole took the case. The drive was a 500 GB Western Digital, using the old FAT32 file system, surface oxidized but still readable. Creating a forensically sound image took over 8 hours. Specialized software EnCase was then used to scan for hidden files, deleted items, and temporary data. After 2 days, Cole delivered a preliminary report: over 1,200 files recovered, mostly personal photos, technical documents, and short voice memos. Rainey zeroed in on a folder named tools_ref, containing numerous garage photos, timestamp December 2011. Metadata showed the last photos were taken at 1852 on December 12, 2011, roughly 15 minutes before Mark was reported missing. The images were shot from the workbench toward the garage door, clean floor, radio on the right, and on the left, a black metal oil drum, identical to the one later excavated. The computer's internal clock had never been altered. Rainey had the imaging unit enhance brightness and compare objects to current crime scene photos. Matches were perfect: same metal workbench, same crooked ceiling light, even the same small scratch on the back wall. She noted, photos confirm presence of oil drum in garage immediately prior to disappearance. In the voice logs folder, Cole recovered 3 short wave files recorded with a default Windows tool. The final one was created at 1909, the same evening. Rainey listened on lab headphones. The first 10 seconds contained faint wind and radio music. Then a male voice, identified as Mark Kane, saying quietly, "Let's see if it runs this time." Next came the click of a switch, metal clanging, and an electric motor starting up, followed by a short laugh. The file cut off abruptly. Spectral analysis showed no editing. The 1909 timestamp fell squarely between the last GPS ping from Mark's truck and Eleanor's statement about him being in the garage. System logs showed the computer was improperly shut down. Power abruptly cut at 1913, only 4 minutes after the final voice file. Someone, or something, had yanked the plug or killed power. There was no activity after 1913. Rainey printed a timeline chart and overlaid it with truck GPS data and weather logs. Everything aligned within the 1850-1915 window, the last interval, with proof Mark was alive and active. Additionally, an unsent email draft dated December 11th mentioned fixing the garage floor to make it level again, further tying Mark to the area that later became the burial site. Rainey summarized, "Recovered data provides last verified activity timeline and visual confirmation of burial presence in garage prior to disappearance." The full report was 16 pages with copies of photos, audio files, and system logs. Cole signed the chain of custody form and resealed the drive under code DS0319. Reviewing everything, Rainey saw every piece of digital evidence, photos, audio, shutdown time, converge precisely on the moment the victim vanished. She updated ND 2011-122 with a new completed section, Digital Evidence Analysis, and added the note, "Data recovered from personal computer confirms Mark Kane's activity ceased at the exact time of disappearance, fully synchronized with the physical investigation timeline." When she saved the final report, the screen still displayed the frozen 1852 garage image, familiar space, dim yellow light, radio static, and the black drum standing silently in the corner. The last photograph before both the man and that scene disappeared for 9 years. After completing recovery and verification of Mark Kane's digital data, Detective Morgan Rainey opened a financial line of inquiry to examine transactions linked to Eleanor Kane in the period after the case was initially closed as presumed missing. She sent formal requests to the North Dakota Insurance Department for all records related to Mark Kane's life insurance payout. Within 3 days, the Audit Division responded with copies of a 2004 policy with Western Mutual Life, face value $200,000, sole beneficiary. Eleanor Kane, legal spouse. Attached was the claim submission dated April 15, 2013, more than a year after the missing person case was archived. Eleanor had signed the request herself and included a presumed death certificate issued by the Williams County Sheriff under the state's 18-month no-contact rule. Rainey noted, insurance claim initiated April 2013, approved June 2013. Bank records showed the full $200,000 paid into Eleanor's personal account at First Dakota Bank, Williston branch. 6 weeks later, $170,000 was transferred to Dickinson Credit Union in Dickinson, the town where Eleanor had registered her new address. The cold case financial investigator traced the funds. The $170,000 was used in September 2013 to purchase a small house at 1028 Harvest Street. Dickinson, in Eleanor Kane's name alone, paid in full, no mortgage. Stark County land records listed the buyer's occupation as freelance music teacher and marital status widow. The remaining funds in the Williston account were gradually withdrawn in 2014 for living expenses and property taxes. Deeper review showed Eleanor had no significant legal income during that period, yet maintained steady spending. Major expenditures included building materials, furniture, and moving costs. Rainey wrote financial behavior consistent with beneficiary post-claim settlement. However, significant purchase aligns with relocation following insurance payout. She also pulled Eleanor's state and federal tax records 2011-2019. North Dakota IRS data showed only $12,400 reported income in 2012 from part-time music lessons, insufficient for normal living without the insurance money. Starting in 2013, she filed from Dickinson, no longer Williston, exactly coinciding with the payout and home purchase. Rainey built a 3-column timeline, event date financial action supporting evidence. Column 1, 2011, Mark disappears. Column 2, 2012, case archived. Column 3, 2013, claim paid and house bought. The sequence showed an unusually smooth financial progression. She added, Eleanor Kane obtained full insurance settlement within 2 years after disappearance, relocated, and purchased real estate outright. A follow-up request to Western Mutual Life confirmed the claim was processed quickly because of the valid presumed death certificate, no contesting relatives, and full documentation. Internal notes described the claimant as cooperative, clear, no signs of fraud. Rainey flagged that note, understandable at the time, since no deeper investigation had yet occurred. The completed 17-page financial report, with all statements, contracts, and tax forms attached, concluded, financial review shows Eleanor Kane received $200,000 from Mark Kane's life insurance policy in 2013, and used the majority to purchase a new residence in Dickinson, consistent with recorded change of address. No other income source identified, all assets acquired post-payout. The report was signed March 22, 2020, forwarded to the state prosecutor, and filed in ND 2011-122, under financial review. Leaving the office, Rainey glanced at the screen still displaying the money flow graph, red lines connecting the years 2011, 2013, like cold monetary footprints. Among those in different numbers, she again saw the familiar image of the Williston garage, where it all began, and understood that the money trail, like the concrete and the soil, led back to the same single point, the house where Mark Kane disappeared. After completing the financial analysis and confirming the insurance payout that Eleanor Kane used to purchase a new home, Detective Morgan Rainey decided to return to Williston to locate former witnesses who might recall additional details from the days immediately following Mark Kane's reported disappearance. She coordinated with the Williams County Sheriff's Office to review the list of residents living near 47 South Prairie Road in 2011, identifying 4 households that still resided in the area. On March 24, 2020, Rainey, accompanied by a local officer, went door to door to conduct interviews. The first was Walter Crenshaw, who had previously reported hearing a metallic noise on the night of the disappearance. Now in his mid-60s, he still lived alone in the house north of the scene. When questioned again, Crenshaw stated he clearly remembered the next morning, around 8 a.m., seeing Eleanor in the yard wearing a heavy coat and gloves, moving back and forth between the garage and the porch. He said, "I saw her drag out a couple of tarps and buckets of water. It looked like she was washing the floor. I thought she was cleaning off snow, but it was still cold and the water was steaming." When Rainey asked for more detail, Crenshaw said he saw her carrying a white bag that looked like a cement sack and a metal shovel, placing them against the garage wall. He saw no police vehicles at that time because the search did not begin until the following evening. This statement was recorded, signed, and coded WIT 07. Rainey then went to Carol Hensley's house to the west, who had been the Kanes' direct next-door neighbor. Mrs. Hensley clearly recalled that the morning after the disappearance, around 8:30 a.m., when she went out to get the mail, she heard loud banging coming from the Kane garage. When she looked over, she saw Eleanor crouched beside the garage door, apparently hammering something, then quickly pulling the door shut. She said, "I was going to ask about Mark," but she just gave a quick hello and went straight inside, her face completely blank. Rainey immediately documented the statement, had Mrs. Hensley sign it, and asked her to draw a diagram of her vantage point. The 2 remaining witnesses, the elderly Parker couple to the east, confirmed they saw Mark's Ford pickup parked in the yard all day on December 13th. But that night, there was strange light coming from the garage. Not the usual yellow light, but flashing white light, like industrial work lights. Mr. Parker said he saw a figure moving past the window, but could not tell who it was. Rainey collected their statements and added them to the file. All 4 new witnesses described Eleanor's activity within the first 24 hours after Mark was reported missing, including cleaning, using materials, and accessing the garage area before any official investigation had begun. Rainey cross-referenced this with the 2011 reports, which contained no record of such behavior, because police did not arrive at the scene until the evening Eleanor called to report him missing. This meant the entire morning of December 13th had been outside the scope of law enforcement oversight at the time. Rainey created a summary table noting, new witness statements indicate Eleanor Kane engaged in unsupervised cleaning activity at garage morning following disappearance. She added, actions inconsistent with distress behavior indicate purposeful alteration of environment. The statements were forwarded to the legal division for validation and to determine whether they qualified as supplemental Tier 2 witness evidence. The supplemental witness report was completed that day, consisting of 4 audio recordings, 2 observation diagrams, and a 10-page summary. Rainey signed off at 5:30 p.m. and updated case file ND 2011-122 with the entry Witness Supplement 2020. Back at her vehicle, she opened her tablet and replayed Crenshaw's slow voice against the wind whistling through the mic. "I remember the water running down the yard, freezing into a thin sheet, shining in the sunlight." That description made Rainey pause for several seconds, picturing the woman alone in the snowy yard, frantically cleaning the morning after her husband vanished, while the snow had not yet melted and the investigation had not yet begun. Everything was saved and coded WitSup 2020, becoming an official supplement to the Mark Kane file. Once the neighbor statements were verified and entered into the record, Detective Morgan Rainey received instructions from the Cold Case Unit to collaborate with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit out of Minneapolis to assess Eleanor Kane's psychological profile and behavioral patterns in the context of the case. On March 27, 2020, a joint agency briefing was held in Bismarck, attended by behavioral specialist Dr. Raymond Holt, who had previously profiled numerous familicide cases in the Midwest. Holt and his team began by reviewing the entirety of Case ND 2011-122, including the 2011 interrogation transcripts, new witness statements, financial data, and the timeline of events. In their analysis, they identified a recurring behavioral pattern. Eleanor consistently controlled the narrative, emphasized her own victimhood, and minimized attention on Mark. In her original statement, she described the weather as a violent blizzard, yet meteorological records showed no blizzard occurred, clear evidence of scenario building to justify the disappearance. Holt classified this as strategic denial, calculated denial, designed to control information. When cross-referenced with physical evidence, the team noted Eleanor's proactive actions the morning after the disappearance, cleaning the garage and handling the area, fit the pattern of post-crime behavioral control, typical of offenders attempting to conceal evidence in a familiar environment. Rainey presented the financial data, highlighting the subsequent sequence, requesting a missing person declaration, waiting the statutory period, collecting the insurance payout, and relocating. Holt assessed this chain of actions as demonstrating a high degree of control, driven not by emotional reaction, but by rationalized planning of consequences. In the behavioral report, the FBI team listed key traits: 1. Rational approach to crisis, 2. Use of language as a narrative control tool, 3. Calm, preparatory cleaning behavior, indicating high composure, 4. Clear financial motive, post-event. Holt wrote, Eleanor Kane displays behavioral patterns of a self-controlled, cognitively defensive individual who plans, rationalizes, and sustains denial to maintain narrative dominance. When asked about the possibility of Mark's suicide, the team ruled it out completely due to the absence of matching psychological indicators and the physical evidence of 2 gunshot wounds fired right to left at close range. Holt concluded the act required proximity, confidence, and control, characteristics typically seen in domestic homicide offenders familiar with the victim. The report also noted post-disappearance behavioral changes. Eleanor quickly relocated, altered her appearance, and severed ties with her former community, classic avoidance of environments linked to the offense. The final assessment rated the alignment between psychological profile and physical evidence as high. Rainey reviewed the findings carefully and saw that the analysis reinforced every assumption she had pursued throughout the investigation. The 2011 disappearance was not an accident, but a deliberate act systematically concealed. Holt verbally summarized, subject demonstrates deliberate suppression of truth, combined with behavioral precision, typical of individuals who act with forethought and control. Based on the behavioral analysis report and the verified chain of evidence, the Cold Case Unit agreed that Case ND 2011-122 had met the legal threshold to proceed to the next step, requesting an arrest warrant for Eleanor Kane on a charge of second-degree murder. On the morning of March 30th, 2020, after receiving formal authorization and the full FBI behavioral analysis package, Detective Morgan Rainey began finalizing the arrest warrant application. She compiled all data accumulated over nearly 2 months of investigation, the Bismarck forensic reports, DNA confirmation of Mark Kane's remains, ballistics analysis, cement and soil samples, recovered digital data, financial records, and both old and new witness statements. The file was sequentially numbered and evidence sealed to ensure courtroom admissibility. Rainey spent the entire day reviewing every section, reorganizing it chronologically from the night of December 12, 2011, through the presumed missing phase to the 2020 case reactivation. In the main summary, she wrote, "Physical evidence, witness statements, and technical data indicate that Eleanor Kane intentionally caused the death of her husband, Mark Kane, then entombed the body in an oil drum beneath the garage floor to conceal the crime." Section 1 presented forensic results, 2 cranial gunshot wounds fired right to left, consistent with Eleanor's dominant hand. The Smith & Wesson .38 revolver, recovered with the body, produced an exact ballistic match. Section 2 presented material analysis, quickcrete cement from a December 2011 production batch matching a receipt in Eleanor's name, soil inside the drum matching the garage floor. Section 3 presented financial evidence. Eleanor collected $200,000 in life insurance proceeds after the missing person case was closed, and used those funds to purchase a new home in Dickinson. Section 4 included the new neighbor statements, witnesses who saw her cleaning the garage the morning after the disappearance, using cement bags and water buckets. The final section was the FBI behavioral profile, confirming the suspect's tendency toward denial, narrative control, and actions designed to conceal criminal conduct. The complete package exceeded 700 pages, accompanied by electronic data disks and crime scene diagrams. Rainey drafted the legal affidavit, citing probable cause under North Dakota Criminal Code, Section January 2, 12. There exists sufficient probable cause to believe that Eleanor Kane, resident of Dickinson, intentionally caused the death of Mark Kane by firearm within the marital residence. The application was delivered to State Prosecutor Robert Halverson that afternoon. Halverson reviewed the summary report, then requested Rainey present it in person at the Stark County Courthouse the following morning. On March 31st, Rainey and a cold case unit legal representative submitted the full package to District Judge Susan Merritt. During the hearing, Rainey presented the entire evidentiary chain in investigative order, timeline, physical evidence, financial motive, and behavior. Each segment was supported by photographs, data, and expert reports. After nearly 2 hours of review, Judge Merritt ruled, the file demonstrates a tight nexus among physical evidence, behavior, and financial motive. Sufficient legal grounds exist to issue an arrest warrant for Eleanor Kane on the charge of second-degree murder. The warrant was signed at 11:17 a.m., effective statewide, with instructions to coordinate execution with the Dickinson Police Department. Rainey received the certified copy, stamped in red approved. In D State Court, she immediately notified the cold case unit and updated case ND 2011-122 status to active warrant issued. Back at the office, she pinned the warrant copy to the caseboard next to the crime scene diagram and photos of the oil drum taken in the lab. For the first time in 9 years, the Mark Kane file was no longer classified, unresolved. On her desk, the signed arrest warrant bearing Judge Merritt's signature was fastened directly beneath the bold heading, Eleanor Kane. Suspect, homicide investigation. Rainey logged in her duty journal, March 31, 2020, warrant approved. Evidence chain complete. Outside the window, late-season snow slowly melted on the roadway, reflecting dull light onto the sprawling case files, evidence of a crime once thought to have vanished with the winter of 2011, now officially entering the phase of justice. On the afternoon of April 1, 2020, the arrest warrant for Eleanor Kane was executed. A joint task force from the Cold Case Unit and Dickinson Police Department carried out the arrest at her residence on Harvest Street, a quiet neighborhood on the southern edge of the city. The arrest took place at 3:45 p.m. under the supervision of Detective Morgan Rainey. When officers knocked, Eleanor opened the door, dressed simply, her hair short and gray, expression calm. Rainey read the warrant and Miranda rights aloud. Eleanor showed no reaction, asking only one brief question. For something from 9 years ago, after identity confirmation, she was handcuffed and escorted to the patrol car in view of a few neighbors. Before entering the vehicle, Rainey clearly stated the charge. You are under arrest for second-degree murder in the death of Mark Kane Williston, 2011. Eleanor lowered her head and said nothing further. The entire arrest was recorded for legal evidence. The convoy left Dickinson for Bismarck in sub-zero weather with light snow falling. Eleanor was booked into the North Dakota State Women's Detention Facility, Cell Block 4, pending interrogation. Concurrently, the state prosecutor's office issued an internal notice confirming that case ND 2011-122 had officially transitioned from investigation to criminal prosecution. All physical evidence, the oil drum, the firearm, the 2 projectiles, DNA samples, financial records, and witness statements, was sealed and transferred to Central Evidence under the designation State vs. Eleanor Kane, marking the case's formal entry into the prosecution phase. Just 2 days later, on the morning of April 3, 2020, Eleanor Kane was brought to an interrogation room at the Bismarck Detention Center for the formal interview. The session included all required parties: State Prosecutor Robert Halverson, Detective Morgan Rainey, an audiovisual technician, and the defendant's attorney, Michael Devereaux. The interview began at 9 a.m. and was fully recorded per legal requirement. After Halverson reread the defendant's rights, Eleanor confirmed understanding and agreed to limited cooperation. Rainey opened by reviewing the case timeline from the evening of December 12, 2011, to the discovery of Mark Kane's remains in the oil drum beneath the garage. She placed a thin folder in front of Eleanor, containing crime scene photos, forensic reports, and the cement purchase receipt. When the photo of the drum appeared, Eleanor stared silently for several seconds, then turned to her attorney and said quietly, "I don't know anything about that." Halverson continued, "Can you explain why a Quikrete purchase receipt dated December 14, 2011 is in your name and lists the address of the crime scene residence?" Eleanor replied evenly, "I bought it to repair the floor. Mark told me to." Rainey followed up, "But Mark had been missing for 2 days by then, according to your own original statement." She did not answer, only pressing her lips together slightly. Attorney Devereaux requested a brief pause for private consultation, then announced his client would decline to answer questions that might incriminate her. Rainey shifted direction, displaying a 2011 photo from Mark's computer of the garage interior, and asking if Eleanor recognized the black oil drum in the right corner. She glanced at it and nodded slightly. "That drum was for old oil," Mark said, to keep it. Halverson emphasized, "Inside that drum we recovered Mark's remains." The statement caused Eleanor to close her eyes for a few seconds, but her voice remained unchanged. "That's impossible. Someone else did that." When Rainey presented the financial records showing receipt of $200,000 in insurance proceeds in 2013, Eleanor insisted it was her legal right, and she had simply followed procedure. "I didn't kill anyone to get that money." Rainey countered with the neighbor's statements describing her cleaning the garage the morning after the disappearance. Eleanor disputed them. "I was shoveling snow and wiping up oil because the police told me to keep it clean. They're mistaken." Halverson replied, "Police did not visit your home that morning. Your missing person call came that evening." She looked down at the table, hands clasped, and offered no further response. During the ballistics segment, Rainey explained that the revolver found in the drum matched Mark's registered firearm and showed no evidence of use by anyone else. Eleanor said slowly, "Mark used to shoot targets in the yard. I don't know where he kept the gun." Rainey asked, "Did you ever learn to shoot?" She answered, "No, I'm afraid of the noise." Rainey then placed the forensic conclusion on the table, 2 close-range shots fired, right to left, consistent with Eleanor's dominant hand. Attorney Devereaux objected to speculative questioning and moved to end the interview, but Halverson clarified, "This is evidence confrontation, not speculation." Rainey asked the final question, "If Mark were still alive, why has there been no trace of contact in 9 years? And why does every piece of evidence point directly to your home?" Eleanor looked up, eyes red but gaze steady. "I don't know, but I did not kill my husband." The interview concluded at 12:15 p.m. The audio and video recordings were sealed and transferred to evidence storage. In the summary report submitted to the cold case unit that same day, Rainey wrote, "Suspect offered limited cooperation, denied all allegations, maintained consistent stance of don't know, displayed calm demeanor, no signs of panic or loss of control, indicating psychological preparation for interrogation." Halverson signed the minutes, confirming the investigative phase complete and the file ready for criminal prosecution. The final investigative report for ND 2011-122 was completed at 4 p.m., stating, "All evidence collected, suspect formally interviewed, investigation phase closed, transferred to prosecution." Rainey closed the case folder and made the final entry in her duty log. March 4, 2020, interrogation concluded, suspect maintains denial. In the hallway outside, the detention center's iron doors clanged shut, and for Rainey, the nearly 10-year investigation into the Mark Cain case was officially over, leaving the remainder to the courts and the justice system of North Dakota. On April 6, 2020, the case file for ND 2011-122 was officially transferred to the North Dakota State's Attorney's Office in Bismarck. Prosecutor Robert Villa, who had more than 20 years of experience prosecuting homicides across the state, was assigned to take over the case. Villa spent the first 2 days reviewing the entire file, more than 700 pages of documents, and 48 technical evidence files. On his desk, he organized the materials into groups: forensic, physical evidence, financial, behavioral, witnesses, digital, and interrogations. The forensic report by Dr. Metz was his first focus. DNA was an absolute match to Mark Cain. 2 gunshot wounds penetrated the skull from right to left at a distance of less than 1 meter, confirming death by firearm and ruling out suicide. Next came Brent Kessler's ballistics report, which confirmed that the 2 bullet fragments matched the Smith & Wesson .38 revolver, legally registered to Mark and owned by the family, with no signs of theft. Villa wrote in red pen, "Weapon of the victim used against him, direct link." He then examined the physical evidence section. Cement and soil analysis matched the garage source. A Quikrete purchase receipt, dated December 14, 2011, in Eleanor Cain's name, paid in cash. Beneath the conclusion, he added a short line, "Physical concealment post-crime, deliberate act." The digital data section was separately clipped. Photos of the garage taken at 1852, showing the oil drum before Mark disappeared. And an audio file capturing Mark's voice, saying, "Let's see if it runs this time," just minutes before the established time of death. Villa noted, "Digital evidence confirms presence and timeline." Next, he reviewed Rainey's financial report. Eleanor received $200,000 in life insurance proceeds in 2013 and used $170,000 to buy a house in Dickinson. Behavior consistent with a post-crime financial motive. The witness section provided further reinforcement. Eleanor was seen cleaning the garage the morning after the disappearance, hauling bags of cement and buckets of water. Villa read slowly, underlining repeated details in the statements, then moved to the FBI behavioral analysis, signed by Dr. Holt. He paused at the sentence, "Subject demonstrates deliberate suppression of truth, combined with behavioral precision." All those pieces, when reassembled, formed what he called a complete behavioral and forensic chain. On April 8, Villa held an internal meeting with assistant prosecutors, outlined the evidence, and laid out the prosecution strategy. He classified the case under North Dakota Century Code 12.1-16-02. Second-degree murder, the intentional causing of death without premeditation. Villa explained, the evidence shows intentional conduct, but no clear proof of prior planning, so a second-degree charge is appropriate and has the highest likelihood of convincing a jury. The meeting ended with the decision to file charges. On April 10th, he personally signed the charging document State of North Dakota versus Eleanor Kane, which read, the defendant, Eleanor Kane, did unlawfully and intentionally cause the death of Mark Kane by means of a firearm, contrary to NDCC 12.1-16-02, a Class AA felony. The 7-page document listed the key evidence and described the sequence of events. The victim shot in his own home, body buried beneath the garage floor. The suspect collecting insurance money after the missing person case was closed. The indictment was filed with the Stark County District Court at 10:30 a.m., assigned case number CR 2021-247. The court acknowledged receipt and scheduled a preliminary hearing within 30 days. Villa informed the cold case unit that the Mark Kane file had officially changed status to filed for prosecution. Copies of the indictment were sent to the detention center to notify the defendant and defense counsel. As he signed the final line, Villa paused, looked at the thick, heavily marked file, and said to his assistant, "We didn't just reopen a missing person case, this is about giving a human being his existence back." On the cover of the indictment, the bold heading State of North Dakota Vilpete Eleanor Kane, second-degree murder, closed nearly 10 years of investigation and opened the formal prosecution phase in the North Dakota justice system. In November 2020, nearly 9 months after the indictment was filed, the trial in State of North Dakota Vilpete Eleanor Kane officially began at the Burleigh County District Court in Bismarck, presided over by Judge Susan Merritt. The courtroom was high security, with media access restricted to audio recording and note-taking only. The prosecution was led by Robert Villa and his team of assistants. Facing them were defense attorney Michael Devereaux and the defendant's legal team. Eleanor Kane was brought in from the state detention center, wearing a dark blazer, gray hair, eyes calm but steady. When asked for her plea, she answered briefly, "Not guilty." Villa opened with an overview of the case, starting with the 2011 missing person report, the investigation's progress, the discovery of the oil drum, the garage excavation, and the forensic and financial findings. He described in detail how the chain of evidence closed, from the hastily poured concrete to the materials receipt, from the rusted gun that matched the bullets to the insurance payout. All of it forms a single straight line pointing to the defendant. He projected crime scene maps, excavation photos, images of the oil drum, and a 3D model of the garage. When the images of the skeleton and bullet entry points appeared on screen, the courtroom fell completely silent. Villa spoke slowly. This was not an accident. This was concealment. Next, he called his first witness, Detective Morgan Rainey. Rainey recounted the 2020 case reopening, the GPR results, the excavation process, evidence recovery, and DNA confirmation. She remained calm and clear, presenting each step with specific exhibits. Forensic expert Brent Kessler followed, confirming the autopsy procedures, ballistics conclusions, and the quickcrete cement purchased by Eleanor. FBI behavioral specialist Dr. Raymond Holt also testified, presenting the behavioral profile. The offender exhibits the classic traits of a controlling personality: denial, calculation, rationalization, and orderly action. When Villa asked, "Do you see the defendant's post-offense behavior as consistent with concealment?" Holt answered, "Absolutely." The prosecution rested after 3 days, submitting all 42 exhibits and 11 witness statements. The defense began its rebuttal with an accident theory. Attorney Devereaux opened Eleanor Kane as a wife who lost her husband in a horrific accident, and for 9 years she has been haunted by her own mistake. He argued that Mark habitually worked on equipment and often carried a gun in the garage. That night, he may have accidentally discharged the weapon while testing it. Devereaux said, then turned to the jury, and in fear and panic, Eleanor made the terrible decision to cover it up. He emphasized the absence of direct witnesses, no biological traces of Eleanor on the gun, and that every conclusion rested on circumstantial inference. The defense called its own expert, Dr. Laura Heim, to challenge the shooting distance, claiming it could have been more than 1 meter and not ruling out self-infliction. Villa immediately countered by reprojecting the gunshot residue patterns on the bone edges, affirming close-range firing that made accident impossible. When allowed to speak in her own defense, Eleanor said in a low, almost emotionless voice, "Mark and I were once happy. He just wanted me to fix the floor. I didn't kill him, I just wanted everything to be okay." The statement silenced the room, but Villa replied simply, "No one is okay when the truth is buried under concrete." After 7 days of testimony, closing arguments took place. Prosecutor, Villa stood in the center of the courtroom, looking directly at the 12 jurors. "You have seen the evidence, physical, technical, financial, behavioral. A man disappeared, buried beneath his own home, and the only person with motive, opportunity, and means was his wife." Attorney Devereaux closed the defense argument by stressing the lack of an eyewitness. "No one saw the shots fired, no one saw Eleanor pull the trigger. When there is doubt, the law demands fairness, and fairness means not guilty until proven otherwise." The defense rested on the 7th day, leaving the jury with lingering questions about the accident scenario the defendant had raised. The next morning, Judge Merritt allowed the prosecution to present a focused technical demonstration to reconstruct the shooting mechanics and determine whether the defense's accident scenario was physically possible. The courtroom was equipped with a large screen, a 3D projection system, and a live demonstration table operated by ballistics expert Brent Kessler. Kessler took the stand carrying a safe, unloaded replica Smith & Wesson .38 Special, along with devices to recreate muzzle pressure and bullet trajectory. He explained the verification process using forensic data, the bullet angle through the victim's skull, Mark Kane's height, and measurements taken from the garage floor. On screen, the 3D model showed the reconstruction, Mark seated leaning back in a folding chair, head slightly tilted left, light coming from the garage door. The shooter stood to his right, less than 1 meter away. The bullet paths appeared as red lines, entering from the rear right and exiting the left temple. Kessler explained, "Both bullets traveled in the same direction, with only a 1.7-degree deviation. This indicates the gun and shooter's hand did not move between shots, meaning the grip was steady." He emphasized that the Smith & Wesson .38 is a double-action revolver requiring a separate trigger pull for each round. It cannot fire 2 shots in rapid succession without deliberate pulls. When defense counsel asked, could the trigger have jammed or fired repeatedly due to mechanical failure, Kessler replied, "We examined the gun despite rust. The trigger mechanism was intact and undamaged. There is no possibility of successive firing without intentional action." Villa requested playback of the lab test footage, same model gun, same angle, fixed on a stand. Only when the trigger was deliberately pulled twice did 2 rounds leave the barrel. High-speed recording showed a 1.2-second interval between shots. Kessler concluded, "If this is called an accident, it would require 2 perfect accidents, identical angle, distance, and direction. That is impossible." After the demonstration, digital forensics expert Andrew Cole was called to tie together the timeline. He displayed a synchronized chart of the audio file. "Let's see if it runs this time," and the computer shut down timestamp at 1913 on December 12, 2011. That moment aligned perfectly with the first shot in the ballistic simulation. Cole stated, "This is the moment Mark Kane was still alive, and just minutes later the entire house power went out, consistent with gunshots fired in an enclosed space." Rainey, recalled as a technical witness, confirmed the entire sequence using vehicle GPS, power grid data, and weather records. She presented a garage diagram marking where Mark sat, the radio location, and the metal workbench. On screen, the 3D model showed every detail spent casings beside the chair, blood spatter direction on the wall, matching the bullet paths, no ricochet patterns consistent with self-inflicted wounds. Villa asked Kessler one final time, "In your opinion, is there any possibility Mark Cain accidentally shot himself twice in the head?" Kessler answered firmly, "No. The angle, hand position, and body orientation completely rule it out. This was deliberate, controlled action." The jurors took careful notes. Some stared directly at the simulation. Attorney Devereaux attempted cross-examination. If the shooter was right-handed, could anyone other than Eleanor have fired? Kessler pointed to the diagram. The trajectory comes from the rear right, a position only achievable by someone standing immediately beside the chair. The only possible approach in a 2.4-meter-wide garage. Villa ended his questioning with, "And who was the only person there that night?" Kessler replied, "According to the record, only Eleanor Cain." The courtroom fell silent again. Judge Merritt thanked the witness, ordered all models and videos entered as official exhibits numbered 41A. As he stepped down, Kessler nodded to Rainey. Both knew this moment had sealed the case's logic. The technical report was read briefly into the record. Based on mechanics, it is impossible for two successive rounds to fire unintentionally with identical angle and trajectory. The shooting was intentional. The jury was asked to review the model once more before deliberating. In the cold white light of the projector, the forensic reconstruction of Mark Cain stood motionless in the garage, and behind him the silhouette of a woman holding the gun, a technical model, yet carrying the undeniable weight of conclusion. When Judge Merritt declared the evidentiary phase closed, the 12-member jury was escorted to the second-floor deliberation room in the Bismarck courthouse, completely isolated from the media. The clerk delivered the full set of exhibits, including copies of crime scene photos, forensic conclusions, the 3 dead bullet trajectory model, and the financial and behavioral reports. The door closed at 5:10 p.m. Jury foreperson, Karen Doyle, a middle-aged woman, began the session by reading the charge aloud. Defendant Eleanor Cain is charged with second-degree murder under North Dakota Century Code 12.1-16-02. She asked each member to share initial impressions. An older man spoke first. "I think this case is crystal clear. You can't call it an accident with 2 bullets in the same direction." A younger elementary school teacher was more cautious. "We have to consider motive. If it was for money, why did she wait until 2013 to collect the insurance?" The foreperson replied, "She may have needed time to legally establish the disappearance. The better the cover-up, the more patience required." A young man at the end of the table opened the financial file. "She had no income. As soon as the case was closed, she collected the money and bought a house. To me, that's a planned sequence." They moved on to re-examine the technical model. The 3D data was projected onto the room's small screen. 2 parallel red bullet paths through the skull. One man nodded. At that range, only someone familiar would stand close enough to fire. Discussion lasted over an hour, revolving around a single question: was Eleanor's action intentional or accidental? One juror observed, "No one saw it, but physical evidence doesn't lie." They reviewed neighbor Crenshaw's statement, describing Eleanor cleaning the garage the next morning, carrying cement bags and water buckets. The foreperson read from the materials report, "Same cement brand and production batch, purchased 12/14." A woman whispered, "If it was accidental, why pour concrete and bury the oil drum?" Silence lasted several seconds. Finally, another juror said, "I think she panicked. But once she concealed it, it stopped being an accident." The foreperson nodded. "Under the law, intentionally causing death without premeditation is second-degree murder. We don't need a clear motive, only proof of conscious action." The group agreed to compare the elements: act, opportunity, motive. Act: Eleanor was the only person home between 19 o'clock and 21 o'clock. Opportunity: the gun was family-owned and kept in the house. Motive: life insurance and financial conflict. Each item was checked off on the whiteboard. The youngest juror said, "I don't see remorse in her statement." She answered, like someone reciting a rehearsed story. They discussed the psychological aspect further. One juror recalled Dr. Holt's assessment: controlled narrative, calculated denial, consistent with an intimate partner offender. At 7:40 p.m., the foreperson called for a preliminary vote, one by one. 11 jurors raised their hands for guilty. Only one remained uncertain. The group paused to discuss further. The holdout asked, if it really was an accident, why didn't she call 911? Another answered, because she knew he was dead, and her immediate reaction was to clean up. That's not an unconscious reflex. 10 minutes later, they voted again. This time, 12 out of 12 agreed on second-degree murder. The foreperson signed the verdict form, noting completion at 8:15 p.m. They asked the clerk to inform Judge Merritt that a unanimous decision had been reached. As they walked into the hallway, no one spoke. Only the sound of shoes echoed on the cold tile floor. In the courtroom, Villa and Rainey stood when the door opened, knowing that 9 years of investigation, thousands of pages of documents, and hundreds of hours of analysis had finally reached a conclusion. The clerk received the sealed envelope from the foreperson and placed it on the judge's bench. Court was adjourned. The reading of the verdict was scheduled for the following morning. Outside the Bismarck courthouse, light snow fell, golden lights reflecting off the building's roof, as quiet as the moment when justice was about to be spoken aloud. On the morning of November 12, 2020, the courtroom reconvened to announce the verdict after nearly 10 hours of deliberation. The Bismarck courtroom was packed. Local reporters were allowed to attend, but not to film. The 12-member jury filed in, faces solemn. Judge Susan Merritt asked foreperson Karen Doyle to stand and read the result. Her voice rang out steadily in the absolute silence. We, the jury of the state of North Dakota, having considered all the evidence and testimony, unanimously find the defendant Eleanor Kane guilty of second-degree murder in the death of victim Mark Kane. A momentary hush fell. Eleanor sat motionless, hands clasped tightly, head only slightly bowed. Robert Villa said nothing, merely exhaling softly. Beside him, Detective Rainey stared straight down at the thick open case file. Judge Merritt thanked the jury and asked both sides for their sentencing recommendations. Prosecutor Villa requested the maximum penalty for second-degree murder under the North Dakota Century Code, citing the calculated concealment and the prolonged obstruction of justice. He spoke slowly. The defendant did not merely take her husband's life, she forced a family and a community to live for nearly a decade with unanswered questions. On the defense side, attorney Michael Devereaux asked the court to consider mitigating factors: no prior criminal record, initial cooperation, and unstable mental health following the incident. He said, "My client has lived 10 years in silence, carrying the weight of her own actions. She is not a monster. She is a lost human being." The judge listened, jotted a few notes, then asked Eleanor Kane if she had any final words. She stood, voice trembling but clear. "I didn't do what they say I did. I lost my husband, and now I'm losing the rest of my life. I just want to be left in peace." No one in the courtroom responded. After a 10-minute technical recess, Judge Merritt returned holding the sentencing order. She read each word slowly, her voice firm and clear. Pursuant to the jury's verdict, the evidence presented, and the provisions of NDCC 12.1-16-02, this court finds defendant Eleanor Kane guilty of second-degree murder. Sentence: 25 years imprisonment at a North Dakota Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation facility, with no possibility of parole for a minimum of 15 years. Eleanor showed no reaction, only closing her eyes briefly, hands clenched together. Rainey watched the officers lead her from the courtroom, the handcuffs glinting steel under the harsh white lights. Villa bowed his head and signed the execution of sentence form in hard, straight strokes. Outside in the hallway, reporters crowded to record the first successful conviction in a reopened cold case in the state's judicial history. Rainey stood at the end of the corridor, quietly watching people leave the courthouse, feeling neither joy nor relief, only finality. She returned to the prosecutor's office, closed case file ND 2011-122 for the last time, and labeled it, "Closed, Conviction Achieved." Inside the evidence vault, the exhibits, the oil drum, the gun, the fabric scraps, receipts and hard drive were permanently sealed. The final investigative report she signed that day simply read, "Mark Kane Case Missing Person 2011, Victim Deceased by Firearm, Perpetrator Eleanor Kane." Sentence in effect. As she left the courthouse, snow was falling heavily over the rooftops of Bismarck. Rainey paused for a few seconds on the stone steps, looking out at the white expanse where winter was beginning again, with the familiar emptiness that only investigators understand when a case finally closes, when all the evidence, words, and people fall silent, leaving only the file resting quietly in the state archives of North Dakota, marked with its final line. Case ND 2011-122, resolved. In December 2020, 3 weeks after the sentence was handed down, file ND 2011-122 was officially marked closed in the North Dakota Judicial Database. The Bismarck State's Attorney's Office completed the transfer of all documents, physical evidence, and legal records to the Cold Case Unit for permanent archiving. Detective Morgan Rainey was tasked with the final summary, an 8-page report detailing the entire investigation, reopening, prosecution, and trial. In the opening section, she summarized, "Mark Kane Case, Missing December 2011, Victim Deceased by Firearm. Perpetrator, Eleanor Kane, sentenced to 25 years imprisonment, November 12, 2020. Case closed." Attached documents included the court judgment, forensic reports, crime scene photos, excavation videos, and digital data backed up to a dedicated drive labeled ND 2011-122 Archive. The central evidence room sealed the remaining physical exhibits in 3 metal boxes marked in red, "Convicted Case, Do Not Reopen." On December 18th, a special transport convoy carried the files out of Bismarck through the snow toward the Cold Case Unit storage facility north of the city. Once technicians completed their checks, the file was placed in slot B12, 4th row, among hundreds of others, decades old. On the spine, the silver-inked lettering read, "Kane, Mark, ND 2011-122, closed, 2020. Rainey signed the archive log at 15:27. An electronic copy of the file was sent to the state archives for preservation in the Cold Case Registry under Resolved Homicides. An internal notice went out to every local police department confirming the case was officially closed with no further investigation required. Rainey lingered in the empty Cold Case Unit office, the neon lights reflecting off the glass etched with the words, "Justice through persistence." She looked at the old photo of the Williston scene, still pinned to the wall, the small snow-covered garage, with her handwritten note beneath it. "No missing person ever truly disappears. They just wait for someone patient enough to look again." When she left the office, she placed the file key in the drawer, along with a small note recording the case completion date. Outside, the year-end snow fell thickly, covering the Cold Case Unit parking lot, the yellow streetlights glowing against the white haze, as if closing a loop that had lasted nearly a decade. From that day forward, North Dakota 2011 PWD 122 was no longer an open case number, but a single closed entry in the state's archives, ending the search for justice for Mark Kane and adding one more solved cold case to North Dakota's record. The story of the 2011 North Dakota cold case is not just a 9-year investigation. It is also a mirror reflecting deeper issues in contemporary American society, where trust, responsibility, and justice remain the foundation of community life. Eleanor Kane was not the image of a spontaneous crime, but the result of silent fractures within a family, where conflict was hidden beneath an appearance of calm. Her deliberate cleaning of the garage the morning after the disappearance and concealing the body under concrete reflect a bitter truth. When people lose honesty and choose silence, mistakes can become irreparable sins. The journey of Detective Morgan Rainey and the Cold Case Unit, people who refuse to overlook even the smallest detail, demonstrates the value of perseverance and transparency in the American justice system. From discovering the Quikrete cement receipt, to recovering digital data, to the FBI's behavioral analysis, every step of the investigation proved that justice, however delayed, can still be found through science and faith in the truth. In a modern society like America, where people are busy and personal relationships are easily forgotten, the lesson from the Mark Cain case reminds us that silence and deception are never an escape. Every individual must learn to face conflict with honesty and seek help instead of hiding. And as Rainey wrote in her final report, no missing person ever truly disappears, a statement true for both people and conscience. Truth, in America or anywhere else, only arrives when we dare to look again at what has been buried. Thank you for following the conclusion of the 2011 North Dakota cold case solved, where justice was found after nearly a decade buried beneath cold concrete. Please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other real-life crime stories, where even the smallest detail can change a person's entire fate.